Tonight's class is dedicated for the total and mega refuah shleima for Nisim bin Saleh. You should have a refuah to nefesh, refuah to guf, and you should see only great things from your children and your grandchildren. All right, we're talking about manifesting your dreams. This is class number 4. You missed the first 3, and you can find them all online on YouTube. Talking about harnessing the ripple effect, transforming through cause and effect. Okay. So I'm just going to jump right in. It's very late. You're tired. I'm tired. I have to wake up really early in the morning. So let's get this party started. Hashem Shemrecha, Hashem Zilcha Ad Yad Yaminecha. We spoke about this last week. The idea that God shadows you. That in the same way that you reflect your attitude in this world, God will reflect your behavior in this world. So for example, where the pasuk says, Lo takum lo titor et bnei amecha v'ahavta l'recha kamocha ani Hashem. Right? You should love your neighbor like you love yourself, for I am God. The Baal Shem Tov rereads this a little bit differently, and he changes the punctuation, and he says, love your neighbor, comma, as you are, comma, I am Hashem. V'ahavta l'recha, comma, kemocha, comma, ani Hashem. So what's he saying? He's saying the same way that you love the others, the way you are, kamocha, ani Hashem. I match you. I'm going to match your behavior. I'm going to match your attitude. I'm going to match the way you respond to the people around you. I will do that. Hashem tzilcha ad yad yaminecha. Hashem is your shadow, by your right hand. That is what God wants. God creates a universe where He responds to you. The way in which you perceive your reality, that defines your reality. We've been speaking a lot about that over the last couple of weeks. Okay, so we know that in Judaism there's this idea of midah keneged midah, right? Measure for measure. Nothing happens in the universe without a midah keneged midah experience, right? And what does that mean? It means that you do something, right? There's going to be some kind of a cause and effect, right? Hashem wants you to have a world where He sees an individual that recognizes that all influences are being caused as causality through A, your actions, or B, God's actions. And this is the difference. We've spoken before about the idea that each of us have a particular set of challenges. The set of challenges that you have are uniquely yours. Everything about you is uniquely you. Your DNA, your family, your friends, your community, the set of circumstances of the environment that you grew up in, the nurture, the nature, and so on and so forth. And those things are given to you because that is the perfect counterweight that is necessary for you to grow as an individual. If you're an individual that is going with the flow, right? You're just going as is, you're most likely going to find yourself dealing with lots of anxiety and depression. There's something about having a contrast, something about a force that's pushing back against us, that pressure that creates an expression of greatness. There's actually an article that I was reading a couple of days ago that one of the greatest finds in 2024 was a molecule they're calling the hope molecule. You guys know what I'm talking about? So they discovered that every single time you contract your muscles create this molecule, and they call it hope. And the more you contract these muscles, the more hope you have. The more hope you have, the more you can overcome challenge, adversity, stress, anxiety, and so on and so forth. When you are not contracting your muscles, you're not being active, you're not moving, and so on and so forth, you are more likely to become depressed. And that hope molecule, which has all these amazing positive effects in your body, can't do its thing. It's in short supply. The more you contract, the more you create hope. That is what midah keneged midah is. That's the Gemara saying over here. Amar Yochanan menayin shekol midotav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu midah keneged midah. He brings a pasuk of Elisha, right? It talks about this pasuk of Elisha, who where God reacted to him midah keneged midah. When he was doing good things, God did good things for him. When he was doing bad things, God was doing bad things for him. We understand that. You do good, God will do good. You do bad, He will respond in kind. The pasuk in Dvarim says, the worst possible thing you can do in this world is believe that your power comes from you. That's only you and there's nothing else. One of the first lessons for wisdom, one of the first things we could all do as young adults is remember that while we should trust ourselves, but we should also have the humility to recognize that there's always something more, always someone else I could learn from, a situation that may require a different set of eyes. We should all have a mentor, a rabbi, rebbitzin, whatever, a coach, whatever you need to kind of ask yourself the real question, the deep questions. This week's Parsha is Parsha Shemot. It's all about names. Now it's interesting that the first time we hear this concept of naming in the Torah is with whom? With Adam, right? Where's Adam? Adam is in the garden, and the Pasuk says, Lo tov liot adam levado, it's not good for man to be left alone, right? And again, God says, let's call out the animals. Let's see what Adam calls each one of these animals. And he starts giving names to all the animals. And he realizes that each one of them has pairs, and he's alone, and they all have a partner, and he's alone. But he names everything. Now, it's interesting to note that he gives names to all things, barring himself. And the question is why? If Adam could give names to all things around him, why couldn't he give a name to himself? Makes sense if you're in the naming, if you have the naming power, you're really gifted at naming things, then why not give yourself a name? And the reason why he cannot give himself a name is because the mind is unable to fully appreciate itself. It relates to the world around you in terms of objects and things. The word for things is dvarim. The word for words in Hebrew is diber, right? Or davar. Same shoresh. The concept of things and words, that is how we relate to the world around us. We cannot fully appreciate ourselves. The mind cannot appreciate itself, which is why we need a partner. This is what the Torah is teaching us in that moment. That you want to go ahead and have the power to name all things, no problem, but recognize you cannot name yourselves. We all need someone to help us get a deeper appreciation of where we are and who we are and where we need to go. Because if you're trying to do it on your own, lo tov lihiyot adam levado, it's not good for you to be alone. You ain't going to get there. You want to manifest greatness? Great, that's amazing. Well, who's helping you create a vision for your future? Who's helping you see beyond the self? Because I'd imagine that most people, of course not the people in this room, but most people, not people listening to this class, but most people, okay, are most likely just going with the flow. They're not asking the questions. The quality of your life is an expression of determined by the quality of the questions you're going to ask. Period. You're not asking the questions, you have no one to ask, that's a problem. Chokhmah comes from the words kochma, the power of asking what, why, how, right? You don't have wisdom if you're not asking questions. And if we're talking about harnessing the ripple effect and transforming thought through cause and effect today, then it starts with having the humility to recognize that you don't know everything. If you believe that's all you, that's a problem. Even koch v'yotzev yadi means that you have to recognize that God gave you the strength to do whatever it is you think it is. It's never coming just from you. There's something more happening. That's what Unclus is saying over there. At the next page, he says, Yet nechsia ha'ilen, right? That ultimately that everything is coming from the above. This is a horrible translation. But Midbar says as follows. He says, B'sham ra'inu et nefilim b'nei anak. This is the Meraglim. The Jewish people are in the desert. They want to have permission to spy the land. They're spying out the land. And we know the story. They go there. They see all these giants in Israel, in the land of Canaan. And they respond back to Moses. There we saw the Nephilim. These are the giants, right? The Nephilim. B'nei Anak, the children of the Ananakites, right, or the Anunnaki, or the giants, right? Ve'enenu kichagavim v'chein hayinu be'eneihem. We were like grasshoppers, to ourselves, and so we must have looked like to them. Like how? Why are the Meraglim, these brilliant individuals who are tasked to go out to spy the land, telling me, the audience, how these, giants perceived them? How do they know how they were being perceived? Right? But it says, our eyes, we were like grasshoppers, and then similarly we were to their eyes, which means the Pasuk itself is telling you straight out, what was the problem? How they perceived themselves. They saw themselves as being grasshoppers, and they created a fictitious fear in their own mind. You start believing a narrative that's not true, and you end up creating a new reality. For example, in this week's Parsha, Moshe comes to God. God comes to Moshe, actually, in the sneh, the burning bush. And God says, Moses, I have the best job for you. You're going to be amazing. You're going to go out. You're going to save the Jewish people. So what does Moshe say? Hashem, listen, I hate to break it to you, but they're not going to believe me. The people you're sending me to are stiff-necked people. They're not going to believe me. If I tell them that you sent me, they're going to say, no way, impossible. So God says, don't worry about it, Moses. I got 3 of the coolest tricks I'm going to teach you right now. Right? Number 1. Grab your staff. Takes the staff. What happens to it? Boom! It's a serpent. How cool is that? This is and don't worry about it. If they don't believe that trick, trick number 2 is what happens. Take your hand, put it into your chest, and you pull it out, and it's talk about sarat, right? Leprosy. Oh my God, he got leprosy. Don't worry about it. You got your next trick. What do? Put it back into your chest, pull it out again, and it's gone. And wait, there's more, because if those 2 don't work, you know what happens next? You take a little bit of water out of Pharaoh's cup, pour it into the ocean, and boom, all blood, right? Now, truth is, we know what happens to the story. Moses comes to the people, and he tells them what happens. What happens? They don't believe him, right? So why did he have to go through this whole process of getting these 3 tricks? God knew already they're not going to believe him. Moses was right. His assessment was true. They didn't believe it. The first miracle wasn't enough. The second one wasn't enough. The third one was the beginning of the process, but it took 10 more beyond that. 9 more beyond those miracles to get everyone to believe. So Moshe wasn't wrong. He was right. Some sages say that the reason why those first 2 miracles occurred, the serpent and the leprosy, was simply because of his Lashon Hara. He spoke Lamed He, Lashon Hara, and he was punished by a snake, a serpent. It bites, it wants nothing in return. It was the same thing like Lashon Hara. You speak it, you get nothing. It doesn't help anybody. It's only bad. And Sarat, we know explicitly, is a consequence for speaking Lashon Hara. So he's actually punished with the first 2 miracles, right? As a result of him speaking poorly of the Jewish people. Why do you think, Moses, that they're not going to believe? Now, ready? The Chachamim point out something powerful. The reason why the people were unable to hear Moses is because he didn't believe in them. He created a reality. Moshe, the teacher, created a reality where the people could not hear him, and he's chastised for it right away in the beginning. The way you perceive the people around you is how they are going to respond to you. So if you see everything as being negative, everyone around you negative, they're going to respond to you in kind, right? That's what we mean. We say Hashem tzilcha al yad yaminecha. That's what we mean when we say v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Hashem. He creates a world in which you mirror, or God mirrors you. Sotah, right? This talks about the whole entire idea over there. Let's skip that one. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lazata, number 9, says as follows: Dat Tunot. He says the guiding force of balance, Hashkachat Hamishpat. This operates on the principle of measure for measure, meaning it reflects justice and fairness, where individuals' actions directly influence their outcomes. That's one hashkacha, one way that God deals with the universe. Number 2, the guiding force of oneness, hashkachat hayichud. This represents a higher hidden level of divine providence, which may not appear just or balanced from a human perspective. It reflects God's ultimate plan and unknowable agenda, often beyond human comprehension. So you have things like, you understand, a square acre is close to 35,000 square feet, right? It's a little bit less. Now, just so you understand, in a square acre, if you have like a 2,000 square foot home, you could have about 19 and a half houses built on a square acre, okay? Total, just between last year and this year, there's already been 35,000 acres that have burnt in California. Okay, think about how many homes. We already have 100,000 people displaced, right? There's today a warning that went out in Los Angeles. They have 1 million more people waiting on, just in case the fire spread, because the winds tonight are going to be between 50 to 70 miles an hour, and no matter what you try to do with all the water in the world, it's very hard to stop a fire like that, right? So mass destruction, right? That, I would say, is hashkachat hayichud. God has some other plan happening here. Can you imagine, God forbid, the question that we asked at my Shabbat table this week was, if you could take one thing from your home, not your passports, not your documents, your credit cards, obviously one thing. What's the one most important thing in your house you would pack? You knew a fire was coming and you couldn't save anything else. What's the one thing you'd want to save in your possessions? And that's what we walked around talking about. Only one thing, not like three things, just one thing. And not like the simple things like your taxes or your documents or whatever it is. You don't have to answer, just think about it, right? The idea is that these are people that are asking that question for the first time. Like, what do you take? Not your family, obviously. Your family's going out, Some of you probably want to leave some of your family members in there, but God forbid. But you're talking about I don't remember ever a time in history where people were in a position where they had literally, even in the Holocaust, you just packed your bags. You had a suitcase with you. Here, people can only take one thing. They're rushing. They have nothing. They're telling people now in those low-lying areas to pack your cars merosh. In case you have to wake up in the middle of the night to go, you have all the things that you need. That's how bad it is. This has different kind of hashkacha. Why is it happening there? I don't know. But clearly there's hashkachat yichud. God has his plan. But we're talking about hashkachat hamishpat. There's a certain justice in the world. And that justice is predicated on this idea of midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Do you understand that? What you put out into the cosmos, boomerang effect, comes back to you. Right? It's a hard thing to kind of swallow. So what I'm really saying is that, I'm going to say this, okay? I'm sorry. Your current reality is because of your choices. It's a hard thing to hear. What are you saying, Rabbi? It's me? I'm the problem? Yeah, you're the problem. It's not just God and his plan. Right? That's something separate. That's what the Ramchal is saying. Right? There's a certain mishpat, there's a certain type of justice that's out there that is part of a bigger plan. I can't fully understand it, but most of what's happening in the world is midah keneged midah, which means you are where you are because of your choices. Are you familiar with Newton's third law of motion? You're going to be, right? You know what Newton's cradle is? Anyone know what Newton's cradle is? Do you ever see those? It's like what's that thing called? Is there another word for it? That's what it's called, Newton's cradle. Do you see those like TikTok things? It's like a series of like 5 or 7 balls on strings, and you take one and you click it. It goes. Chick, 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 chick. What's that? That one? So that was actually one of Newton's creations, and he said like this: like you take one ball, right, and you pull it out. What happens? You'll have one ball on the other side coming out. You take 2 balls on one side, you let go of it, you got 2 balls going back and forth, right? And it's like a fascinating experiment. So he says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. This is a law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. When one object applies a force to another, the second object applies an equal force back to the first object, but in the opposite direction. Right? Now think about that for a second. How does that law apply to my behavior? I think it does. I think this is all part of the same thing. Right? Mishnah Perkei Avot says, right? The fum tsar agra. According to the pain is the reward. There is no action that doesn't have some kind of a reaction. Right? When you go through tsar, you go through challenge, there's going to be something that comes back in return. You're not here to finish the race. You're not here to finish telling the story. You're here to figure out how you're going to respond in the circumstances you find yourselves in. That's it. And if you're responding negatively, destructively, unfortunately, the world around you will respond in kind, the same exact way. Kedushat Levi in Parshat B'Shalach says, to the degree of the awakening from below, so is the bestowal from above. Same idea, reinforced over and over again. So the next Gemara over there is talking about the story of the Jewish people standing at the Yam Suf, and they're crossing till they're leaving Egypt, and they're finally standing there. It's one of my favorite scenes in Charlton Heston's movie of the Ten Commandments, and or Moses if you like the Disney version. And the Jewish people are standing there. They're at the beach of the Yam Suf, and the Egyptians come running after them. And we know the Midrash tells us that there was the cloud that protected them at night turned into what's the word again? I just learned a new word. A fire-nado, a fernado. That's what it is. Like a fire. You guys saw that? There's like where a fire becomes so big it becomes like a tornado, and like spins around and swirls around. So like that's because that's how they showed the movie. So you have this fire-nado separating the Jewish people and the Egyptians, and the Jewish people are freaking out. They don't know what to do. Moses starts to pray, and what does God say? Lama, why are you coming? Why are you praying to me now? Go into the water, go do something. And then we know the famous story of Nachshon ben Aminadav. And what does Nachshon says? He says, I see everything happening around me. It's obvious God put us at this particular place for a reason. There's only good. So if we're standing at the beach and we're stuck and sandwiched because we got mountains on the sides, right? And the Jewish people and the Egyptians are being pushed back by this fire, and the only option here is to cross. We're supposed to leave Egypt. We're still in Egypt. How are we going to leave? We have to go into the water. So what does he do? He jumps into the water. Now, what was he hoping to do? Was he going to say, do or die? Like, if it doesn't work, I just die? Was he ready to commit suicide if it didn't work? Or was he certain and confident that a miracle would occur and the ocean would split for him? What was he thinking? What would you be thinking at that moment? Okay, it's like do or die, right? But that's not what he was thinking. Pasuk says, Az Yashir Moshe. What does the word Az mean? Then it's talking about when? Past, present, future? What? So the future tense. Then. Right? I understand. Then we'll sing. Why are they singing? Az Yashir. So the Chachamim point out, right, that the reason why it says Az Yashir is they already knew they were going to sing the song. We'll sing it once we cross. We knew already. Az Yashir Moshe Uvenei Yisrael. It wasn't back. It's Az Yashir. We knew we were going to sing the song. That was the kind of faith they had. That's the kind of trust they had. You want God to split oceans for you? Do you believe Az Yashir that you will sing that song? Not this week. Next week, there's this lady who I'm researching, Helen Helsdale. She's this woman who won over 1,000 different like prizes in her lifetime. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know if she was in Instagram or not. Okay, it could be they have like one of those thingies. Yeah. So she's this woman who believed very early on that you manifest your reality. It's something called spec. We're not going to talk about it today, but she has this whole system of how you can get what you want. She won over 1,000 different types of games and prizes. She won a house fully furnished, and it's like she kept winning it over and over. She won so much that people called her like a scam artist. Like, how are you doing this? Didn't make any sense. But she talks about this idea that it wasn't enough for her to go ahead to just imagine, winning the game. You had to see yourself receiving the prize. You have to believe it. The more you made that your consciousness aware of the potential for you to receive something in this most positive way, the more the nature of the world around you bend itself to you. That's how it works. But if you're not able to imagine, question, you don't have a real vision of where you want to go. It's not clear to you. You don't really believe it. You're just saying it because you want to feel good because you said something. It's not going to go anywhere.
So she has to be open to abundance. She has to be open to this.
She has to be not only open to it, she has to actually imagine it happening. It's not enough to buy the lotto ticket and say, I'm going to win. I believe I'm going to win. She went through a whole process of, I'm not only going to win this thing, she saw herself getting the check. She saw herself dealing with the media. Like, she made the whole thing as real as possible in her head. And the more she was able to articulate and create an image and a vision of her future, the more that future aligned itself with what her wants are. That was her thing. And I think that's what the Chachamim are talking about over here. Besides power, charging chariots, prayer is the ultimate form of awakening. I don't know if that's true for all of us, but certainly it is true for many of us, right? That when you're in the state of prayer, of pilel, tefillah, to self-introspect, right? You're able to rejudge. If you're really sitting there really praying because you really want to change, you really want to grow, that's a powerful moment where you could align yourself with a future that has not yet become your reality, but requires a level of effort on your part to make that reality your reality. If you do nothing, nothing happens. Look at what Rabbi Miller says. His prayer is the aerobic of the will. It's the aerobics of the will. Prayer is about focusing our attention and strengthening our will. Through prayer, we connect with our deepest desire and clarify what we truly want, shaping who we are at our core. That's what tefillah is supposed to be. You are clay, right? You are plaster. And the whole purpose of tefillah is for you to have 3 times a day, or at least 1 time a day, where you're thinking very deeply about how you want to reshape what it means to be you. Adam means me'adamah, from the earth. We can be molded into all kinds of things. The circumstances that you were born into do not define you. They were the circumstances you were born into were the perfect circumstances that you need to have the free will to choose to want to become something else. But you're stuck. You either don't believe enough that things can change, or you don't trust yourself, or whatever it is, but it's all, whatever it is, the blockage is coming from a negative, dark space. The most successful people in the world, look at Donald Trump. It's like such a funny example. I just thought about it, right? He's an interesting guy, right? I would never invest in anything that he does. I just feel like, I don't know, like he's very overconfident. He's he's very narcissistic. He's a little haughty. These are not the traits that I would be looking for in an investor. I just would not want to invest with him. But on some level, it's that same insane overconfidence, right, that drives the guy to make his reality his reality. If it was anyone else, okay, after that 2020 loss, they would have walked away and said, not worth it. I'll just walk away. Right? But because they knew that he wasn't going to stop, they came after him with everything they possibly could find. And yet somehow, not only did he win this past election, it just sounds crazy, like thinking about it right now. Like the whole thing is absolutely. We're gonna look back and tell our grandchildren about this whole episode, and we're gonna laugh about it because it is the craziest thing in the world. Like, how did this guy win? He's a clown. He's a TV personality. Right? He had a show called The Apprentice where he was firing people left and right. His key line is, "You're fired." I mean, like, that's the president of the United States of America, the most powerful position on the planet. Although it's an embarrassing one right now for so many reasons. There are other countries in the world that have more sensitive forests than California, and they haven't had any fires. Do you know why? Because they were prepared. They were prepared for it. But California's not prepared because for them, it's philosophy, a philosophy of all kinds of things are more important than saving the lives of the people that live there. Anyway, so if Donald Trump can go ahead and manifest a victory to win the presidency, you don't think you can? Are you telling me that Donald Trump is better than you? That's what you're saying. You could have been the president of the United States of America, but you didn't want it. I'm not saying you want that, but you get the things that you truly want. Right? That's all I'm trying to get at. You really get the things you truly want. And this is what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, right, our sages of blessed memory have said, at the time that Israel does the will of God, they are called children. And when they are not doing the will of God, they are called servants. Why aren't they just called not his children? Why are they called servants? It's like a weird thing. Right? You're doing God's will, you're God's children. You're not doing God's will, you're a slave. Yeah.
What about Abraham?
What about?
Abraham Abdo and like the love to keep prophecy.
Okay, it's true, but this is talking about in the negative sense, right? We're not talking about that's a positive. Like, that's someone who's it's true. This is not. That's not what we're saying over here. This is coming.
The children of Israel.
This is the children of Israel we're talking about, right? You're right. There is this concept where you can surrender yourself and become God's servant, and over there, I would say you're doing God's will, right? And there you're called a servant of God. But over here, the person that is not doing God's will is called a servant in a derogatory, negative kind of way, not in the positive way that you just described.
Because you're not a co-creator anymore. And
Because you're surrendering yourself to your circumstances. That's exactly the definition of a slave. Why would you want to surrender yourself to your circumstances when you have the power of freeing yourself? You know that story, the famous story of the 2 guys that were in jail, and the one guy says, "You know what, I'm breaking out. Like I finally made a hole in the wall." And the other guy says, "No, I'm too afraid that if I go, I'll get caught." Right? So he says, "I'm leaving tomorrow morning. I'm out. You want to come? Yes or no?" He's like, I'm not going. Anyway, so one of these convicts escapes. So the guard comes in the next morning and he sees this guy sitting there. He's like, where's your friend? He's like, look, he opens up the hole. He shows him the guy escaped. He's been plotting this and that. Whatever it is. He's like, he opens the gate and he starts beating this guy silly. He's like, why are you beating me? I stayed. He's like, you're an idiot. You could have left and you stayed? What kind of an idiot are you? You deserve to be beaten, right? That's what this Gemara is saying over here. If you're someone that has the power to unlock the jail cell that you're in, right, and you don't use it, then you're nothing but a servant. To be a child of God means that you're someone that is using all the keys, all the tools that God has bestowed upon you, bestowed upon us. Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. You got to be wholehearted with God, because when you're wholehearted with Him, He's wholehearted with you, right? So we say this in the end of Bamidbar, where Moshe is frustrated with the Jewish people in Parshat Bahalotecha, and they're sinning, they're complaining about the meat, and Moshe is having his whole entire meltdown over here, right? They want meat, they don't want the man. Hanochi hareiti kol ha'am hazeh. Did I give birth to this? Did I produce these people? Am I the guy? Ki tomar alai she'eseh b'chakecha kasher yisah ha'omen et hayanek al ha'adama asher nishbat avotav. You want me to carry them on their bosom as a caregiver, as a caregiver carries an infant to the land? I can't do any of these things. I can't do it. Now it's interesting that the word ha'omen, right, comes from the word emunah. Ha'omen et hayanek al ha'adama, right? This is the idea that you're the caregiver who's caring for the nursing young, right? This idea of Moshe complaining about them. Why is he complaining about them in this way? Well, number one is their rejecting of Moshe. They're asking for meat and not wanting the man is their way of rejecting Moshe. Moshe's merit was bringing down the manna from heaven. When they say we don't want the manna, what they're really saying is, Moshe, we don't want you. But this idea that he's nursing them, right? This omen. Tehillim says, Im lo shiviti v'dimamatai nafshi kigamol alai v'imo kigamol alai nafshi. Right? He says, like a suckling child at his mother's side, like a suckling child is my soul. When someone is suckling, the way emunah works is like this, right? It has to do with yenek. Emunah is connected to nursing. How? When a child nurses, right, what ends up happening? The child is drawing the milk from the mother, and the more the child pulls that milk from the mother, what happens? The more milk is produced. Same way with emunah. The more emunah you have, the more faithfulness you have to your truths, the more you are faithful to your beliefs, right? The more emunah you have, the more God is able to give you the things that you need. Look at the Kedusha Levi, number 21, regarding the bread of affliction. He says, in the nature of one's relation with God, the two ways one can approach the divine. Number one, as a son to a father, or two, as a servant to a master. Number one, this approach emphasizes a relationship based on love, closeness, and affection. The son feels a natural bond with the father, reflecting the idea that God is a loving parent who cares for his children. Number two, as a servant, as a master. The relationship is grounded in awe, reverence, and a sense of duty. The servant recognizes God's authority and approaches with humility and submission. Lechem oni, right, the bread of affliction, symbolizes the realization about this relationship. It is not about initiating something new, but about making this relationship tangible and real in one's life. The act of eating the matzah and participating in the seder helps one internalize and, what does it say next? Manifest their connection to God, whether through love, awe, or a combination of both. The whole of the seder on Pesach is for you to create a reality of my relationship with God, building my emunah so that there's something coming back. God is not a genie. This is the mistake we make. We think it's like Aladdin. Oh, I go open up the Siddur, Hashem, Shir Lamalot, blah, 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 help me get that. It doesn't work like that. All right, what we're saying is like this. The circumstances that you find yourselves in is the tapestry or the material that needs refinement through your free will. If you don't have a vision of where you're taking all that, you're nothing but a servant, you're stuck. Because what's going to end up happening is you're going to become a slave to your society, your environment. Okay, your environment will determine what you are. Your nurture and nature will determine what you become and where you go. Your mazalot will determine where you end up at the end of things. But in Mazal Yisrael, we say that the Jewish people are not bound by mazalot. You can become something more. Right? Okay, great. Well, what are you doing? You live in a world, a reality of cause and effect. Right? There's a midah connected midah aspect in the universe. So if you're walking around in that negative state, you're maintaining negative, destructive ideas, the world around you will respond in kind. These are the two mantras that I want you to walk away with, and then we'll call it a night and I'll take questions. Faith does not mean passively waiting for miracles. It means actively opening the door for them to enter. That's what emunah means. Emunah means opening up your heart, your mind, to allow these miracles to become your reality. And number two is faith is the vessel that draws down abundance. The stronger the vessel, the more it can hold. That's the purpose of the challenge in your lives. The challenge in your lives is if there's no pressure, there's no diamond. There's no greatness, there's no excellence. The hardships that we go through is to make the kli better. God's going to get what he wants no matter what. He wants you to be better. But there's two ways of getting there. Circumstance or choice. Circumstance is always harder. I don't want you to go through circumstance. I don't want you to have hard. I don't want you to live in a world where your house is burned down for you to wake up, that your possessions don't define you. I don't want you to live in a world where your whole life becomes about chasing materialism, only for you to realize, I can't believe I made that poor choice and thinking it was only about materialism, and there's a whole other side to reality. Myself, my spirituality, my community, and so on and so forth. That's what this is saying. You choose. It's up to you. But if you want to manifest a better, greater reality, just know that it starts with you inside. Your inner understanding of who you are and where you're going will reflect and reshape Bezrat Hashem, your outer reality. Have a great night, everybody. Questions, comments, concerns? Yeah.
Don't we have a concept in Judaism, probably source it, but it's not coming to me right now, where if you're in your own, like, go back to your jail example.
Yes.
If you're in jail or something, you need to kind of free someone else from their own personal jail before you can get redeemed yourself.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
You can't save someone else, but you can save yourself.
Yeah, so it's almost like the same idea of like,
How's that related?
Or something, pray for someone in the same position, and you'll get it yourself. But I've heard things regarding like just someone who's in a rut or whatever. Sometimes, I guess, you have to free someone else or help them get out of their.
No, you cannot. The idea you just said that you cannot save someone in prison when you're imprisoned yourself. What that idea means is that no one can help you unless you help yourself. Right? No one's pulling you out of jail. You got to pull yourself out of jail, right? You can't rely on someone else. This was Yosef's mistake. When Yosef HaTzadik was in jail, right? Number one is, first of all, he always believed he was getting out. He never lost emunah that things would go dark. In the worst of circumstances, a guy whose brothers sold him into slavery. Right? It's like at the end of last week's parsha, such a powerful line where the Torah tells us how they buried Yaakov, and now the brothers come to Yosef and say, "Listen, Dad told us that you should swear that you're not going to take revenge, because back in the day, the custom was that you don't kill the brothers when the father's alive. You saw that from Esav. Esav said, "I'm not going to kill Yaakov until Yitzchak dies." So the brothers are coming to Yosef and say, "Listen, Dad told us to tell you to swear you're not going to take revenge." So what does Yosef do? He cries. He's crying. He's like, "You think it's not you, it's God." He says the whole thing again. Now, if you were Yosef and you heard that, what were you running through your mind? Two things ran through my mind if I was role-playing Yosef at that moment. Number one is, if my father wanted to tell me this, he would have told me himself. He would have said my brothers after he died. Okay, so number one is they're lying to me. And number two is, we've lived together for the last 17 years in Egypt in peace. How low do they really think of me? And what does he respond? Guys, it's not me, it's all Hashem. Don't you get it? They still didn't get it. After 17 years living in Mitzrayim, they didn't get it. So I know how hard it is to get it. right? The only way the Shvatim could have saved themselves in Mitzrayim is if they saved themselves first. The shibud of Mitzrayim came from the fact that the brothers still were unable to see Yosef Tzion Elokim. They were unable to see the greatness in others. In the same way that Adam cannot name himself, right? He needs the help of other people. I'm not saying you should do it alone, but ultimately the function of the other, of the Ezer Kenegdo, will either be someone that stands against you or beside you. But it has to do with you first, always. It's your interpretation of yourself comes first. I can't save you if you think you cannot be saved. You can't save someone who's drowning who does not want to be saved. So first there has to be hope. You have to have the hope molecule. You have to have that ability to recognize that no, there is the possibility that there is no scenario where I give up hope. When it says v'yikach, ish mishevet, I forget that wording again. Something when a man takes a girl from the tribe of Levi, and he ends up marrying. We know that's Amram marries Yocheved. Rashi tells over there that Amram divorced Yocheved. Why did he divorce her? Because he says, listen, he's like, the game's over. Like, there's not going to be any more Jewish people. Done. God doesn't want the Jewish people to survive. So he says to his wife, I'm divorcing you. As a result of him divorcing his wife, every single Jewish man divorced, everyone got divorced. There are no more families. Imagine right now, the biggest rabbi in the world, whoever that may be right now, gets up, he gets on national television, says, guys, divorce your wives, no more children, it's over. We're closing up shop, no more Judaism. There will not be a next generation. We're closing it up right now. That's what happened. Didn't even say his name because it's so embarrassing. But that was his position, because how could you give a name to someone who gives up hope? That's not what it means to be a Jew. To be a Jew means I never give up hope. It doesn't matter how dark it was in Egypt. It doesn't matter how complicated it was. And that's what Miriam comes and says. Like, you're going to give up hope? You're worse than Paro. Your decree is much worse because you have given every single Jewish man and woman no hope for the future. If there's no hope, what does Viktor Frankl tell us when people have no hope? They die within 24 hours. Hope is everything. But hope is a muscle. And if you're not working on building it and creating it, you're not working on you give up on it, it's paralyzing. So I'm saying you first have to have that tikvah, that hope that things can change. That things that the universe around you is just responding to you. Take responsibility for where you're at. Don't blame it on other people. It's you. You're where you are. You want to pull yourself out? Great. Who are you going to and speaking to help you see the world a bit more clear? But ultimately, it's your responsibility. Right? He's going to respond to you the way you respond to him. Okay, great question. Any other questions? Yeah.
So to relate to Hashem isn't really enough. We need to have the humans, right? Like, because Adam Harishon was there was still an otherness between him and Hashem.
Yeah.
And he still couldn't recognize himself.
Correct.
Even though he had this relationship with Hashem. So in
Yeah.
that sense, we really do need other people.
Correct. You need the people. That's why there are people around you. The people around you all have the ability of seeing things in you that you cannot see in yourself. And therefore, the chavruta, the friend, the partner, all of that is there on purpose. Now, when they frustrate us, and it isn't hunky-dory, and they say things that upset us, we automatically react negatively. And we create this negative, vicious cycle. We don't learn from it, right? And when we change the way we see the people around us, you change the way the people around you will respond to you. Like I said that story last week with Rabbi Fari's son at the school with the passing the notes. I'll say it again because it's worth hearing again. Rabbi Fari's son Yitzchak was going to a new school, and it was very complicated finding a good school in New York. And they found a school, and he goes to parent-teacher conference. And the first thing the rabbi says to him is, "Welcome. By the way, I caught your son yesterday handing out notes in class." So he's like, "Oh my God, here we go. He's going to destroy me about my son and this and that. He's a troublemaker, blah blah blah." And instead of the rabbi, going after Yitzchak for doing something negative in class, he said, "No." He's like, "I want you to know that I was so happy when I saw your son passing out notes because it means he was actually able to find friends." That he was able to find the courage to reach out to someone in class, and I'm so excited for him. I'm so happy. I was a little nervous about the beginning. The rabbi reframed that whole entire moment in time. If it was one of my teachers, I would have thrown that class. I would have got a note to my mother. I'm the worst guy. And I was the worst guy because that's how my teachers saw me, as the worst guy. But imagine coming from a place where people recognize the true nature of who you are, someone who really wants to do good, but is often misunderstood. The way the teacher saw that boy is how that boy will reflect that interpretation of himself in this world. I can't change it forever. You can't change all things that were done. You have to accept that what was done because you need to be where you are right now. Now, moving forward, you have the ability of breaking out of it. You want to stay where you are? Great. You could be a slave. That's your choice. You could be a slave to your reality, a slave to the circumstances, or you could be a child of God and recognize that He's willing to give you the keys if you're willing to play the game. Any other questions?
Like unrelated question.
Go for it.
You were saying that the animals, they were created with both genders before Chava was created?
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I just said that Adam was alone.
Okay, but when he was naming the animals, they were
Both genders were there,
both
yes.
genders were there?
Correct.
So is there like a reason why the animals were created in multiple genders, but man was created alone?
Well, there's two answers to that question. I'm turning up this tape. Anyway.